Welcome back to The Explainer. Today we're taking an absolutely wild journey, starting from the microscopic physics of computer processors and zooming all the way out to high-stakes DeFi architecture on Arbitrum. We're going to fundamentally challenge how you think about the math running our digital economy. Because right now, there's this tiny, obscure hardware quirk that is literally threatening to break smart contracts and put millions of dollars at risk. We're talking about the FPU Gambler.
Okay, quick look at the roadmap today. We'll be hitting the Grand Computational Illusion, FPU Gambler versus ALU Surveyor, the blockchain determinism mandate, orb swaps polar coordinate trap, floating point drift under stress, and we'll wrap it up with the fixed point surveyor solution. Let's just dive right in.
Section 1, the Grand Computational Illusion. We actually need to start by completely shattering a core myth about computers.
You know, we all just kind of assume computers are perfect at math, right? Well, actually, scratch that. They aren't. Chip manufacturers like Intel, AMD, they literally burn these secret seed tables directly into their silicon. And they do this because they want blazing fast speeds for rendering things like 3D graphics. I mean, if a shadow in your favorite video game is calculated slightly off by a millimeter, nobody cares. As long as a frame rate stays high, you're happy. But because these tables are heavily guarded corporate trade secrets, it creates what's called non-deterministic drift. This means your computer's calculation of a complex math equation might genuinely disagree with my computer's calculation somewhere down in the 9th or 10th decimal place. So perfect universal math is actually kind of an illusion.
Moving on to Section 2, FPU Gambler versus ALU Surveyor. Let's meet the combatants living inside your machine.
So think of your computer's physical brain as a turf war between two radically different characters. On one side, we have the floating point unit. Let's call him the gambler. The gambler throws darts at a board to guess an answer incredibly fast, heavily relying on those hardware approximations we just talked about. On the exact opposite side, we have the arithmetic logic unit, the surveyor. The surveyor is slower, incredibly rigid, but absolute in its precision. It guarantees that 1 + 1 is exactly 2 every single time across every machine on Earth. So the real question here is, which one of these characters do you want handling the ledger for your life savings?
I absolutely love this quote because it hits the nail on the head regarding the danger of the gambler. The floating point unit acts like a giant blender. Once your financial data gets approximated and chopped up to save on processing time, the original provenance is permanently destroyed in a mathematical wood chipper. You totally lose the exact chain of title. You can never unblend that smoothie to get the exact original fruit back. And that's a terrifying prospect when you're dealing with immutable smart contracts where every single decimal needs to be perfectly accounted for.
Which brings us to Section 3, the blockchain determinism mandate. Let's see what happens when we force this hardware reality into crypto.
Blockchains, by their very nature, require absolute zero-tolerance agreement. Every node has to reach the exact same conclusion independently. So if an Ethereum or Arbitrum smart contract uses the FPU Gambler, network nodes are going to fundamentally disagree on those tiny decimal approximations. Let's say node A runs on an AMD chip and says an account balance ends in a 3, but node B runs on an Intel chip and says it ends in a 4. Well, that instantly shatters the cryptographic consensus. The network literally cannot agree on the universal truth, which causes a catastrophic fork where the entire financial ledger splits in two. It's basically the ultimate doomsday scenario for a decentralized network.
Section 4, orb swaps polar coordinate trap. Let's look at a high-stakes, real-world case study.
Standard automated market makers usually move along a simple, flat Cartesian line or curve. But OrbSwap decided to do something totally different. They use polar coordinates to process swaps. Imagine swapping your crypto assets not by sliding along an X and Y axis, but by rotating around a circle. Now, this is super innovative and theoretically allows them to build massive, multi-asset stablecoin pools really efficiently. But there is a massive catch. Executing these multi-dimensional rotations requires calculating complex angles using heavy trigonometry like sines and cosines, and the problem is, computers don't naturally speak trigonometry.
And right here is the smoking gun. This is absolutely crucial to understand. By explicitly writing their Arbitrum smart contract code using Rust's F64, which stands for 64-bit floating point math, for trigonometric functions like cosine and square roots, OrbSwap is actively inviting the FPU Gambler to manage its financial logic. They are deliberately pulling unpredictable, non-deterministic math right into the heart of their architecture. Instead of forcing the rigid surveyor to do the math, they're essentially handing the keys to a multi-million-dollar vault over to the guessing gambler, guaranteeing precision loss under the hood.
Section 5,
floating point drift under stress, because things get really scary when the system is pushed to the brink.
We've identified the vulnerability. But what happens when the FPU Gambler actually meets extreme market stress? Look, it's incredibly easy to ignore tiny decimal errors during calm, sideways trading days. A microscopic rounding difference of a fraction of a cent? It seems entirely harmless. But the true danger isn't in the calm. It exposes itself during a massive, panicked financial event where liquidity is violently shifting.
Think back to the Silicon Valley Bank collapse and the crazy stablecoin run of March 2023. A massive depeg event like that creates extreme, anti-correlated variables. You have millions of users simultaneously fleeing one asset for another inside an n-dimensional liquidity pool. When you push those extreme, panicked numbers through OrbSwap's high-dimensional floating-point math, the foundation just becomes incredibly fragile. The trigonometric angles stretch, the hardware approximations widen, and the risk of catastrophic precision loss absolutely skyrockets. It's like building a giant skyscraper on a foundation of sand. It holds up fine on a sunny day, but a market earthquake's going to bring the whole thing down.
To make matters even worse, developers sometimes try to use a band-aid fix. Because the Ethereum virtual machine strictly requires whole integers for its final state, contracts will try multiplying these sloppy floating-point angles by massive scaling factors, like 10,000, just to force the decimal point over. But here's the thing, this doesn't save the math, it actively ruins it. It takes those tiny hardware approximations from the silicon seed tables and compounds them, blowing them up into severe, non-deterministic financial drift that violently breaks the contract's accounting. You're literally just taking a bad guess and multiplying it by 10,000.
Finally, Section 6, the fixed point surveyor solution. Because thankfully, there is a clear way out of this mess.
If we want to build truly secure, n-dimensional AMM, developers have to deliberately ditch floating-point trigonometry entirely, period. They have to do the hard work of building with fixed-point integer math to lock in the undeniable truth of the surveyor, stepping away from the probabilistic gambler and moving entirely over to deterministic logic gates is the absolute only way to achieve the strict mathematical agreement we need for undeniable forensic trust and total on-chain safety.
So as we move deeper into the future of high-stakes computing, you really have to ask yourself, are you willing to settle for a microchip's best guess, or will you demand a perfect mathematical blueprint? Keep questioning the systems you rely on, and always think critically about the hidden engines governing your digital assets. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer, and I'll see you in the next one.